Pujari Gamarua. My name is Zoe. I work with Sydney Living Museums. Welcome to our live event. Pujari Gamarua is just one way of saying good day in local language. So to start off today, I'd like everyone to have a go at saying Pujari Gamarua with me after three. So have a go. 1, 2, 3. Pujari Gamarua. Fantastic. I'm here at the Museum of Sydney, which is located on Gadi country. The local people call this place Waran. We know it in the English language as Sydney, but for thousands of years it was known to the Sydney Aboriginal people as Waran. It was a place with all the plants, animals and resources for the Gadi people. So I'd like to respect Gadi people by acknowledging it's upon our land upon their land that we carry out our program today. Now, in today's webinar, you guys will be able to see me, but we won't be able to see or hear you. But that doesn't mean you can't interact with us today. So there are a few ways you can interact during our live session today. So first we'll have some polls, questions that will pop up on your screen, and you can select an answer or multiple answers sometimes as a way to interact with us, and we'll be able to see some of your answers coming through. We also have the digital hands up. Now, I know some of you have been using that already. Fantastic. So sometimes you might be prompted to pop your hand up. So make sure you find that button and you can use that. Maybe some of you are practicing right now. And our last function today is we've got the Q&A function. So that is where you can type in questions when prompted by us. If you would like to ask any questions of us, we have our friendly moderators standing by, who are the only ones who will be able to read your questions, and we'll be able to provide you with some answers when prompted. Okay, so it is so very exciting to see so many schools join us today. A lot of you from home. So we have over 5,000 students joining us. So welcome everyone, and it's really exciting to see that we have schools from all around Australia. So we have schools from Western Australia, we have schools from Queensland, lots of schools in New South Wales, but also from Canberra and Victoria. So welcome everyone, it's really exciting to have you today. Now let's have a look at the many different Aboriginal lands across New South Wales. Okay, so here's a map up on your screen. Now, of course, we know that there are hundreds more across Australia, but here we have New South Wales. So you might even be able to spot straight away where you are. And we've got a question, a poll up on your screen as well. So are you able to see where you are? Okay, now we won't be able to fit all the lands there, but we have Gadigal land. Some of you might be really close to where we are right now. Darawal, oh, a lot of you from Dara, that's fantastic. Wiradjuri, Kamilaroi, hey, we've got some people from Kamilaroi, Ewan, we've got Gundungara as well, fantastic. We've got 8 or 9 who've selected Gundungara, fantastic, and lots of you other as well. But wow, a huge amount, 176 of you, 182, 183 from Dara, fantastic. So lots of you are from New South Wales and beyond, that's fantastic. So I'm standing here in Gadigal Place, a part of the museum that's all about the Gadi people. There are objects on display, artwork and information about Gadi people from the past and their stories. So how they lived here in Warurabanga. Today we're doing a program called Warurabanga. Now, Warurabanga means to make string, and later on in the program, we're really lucky to get to show you how to make string. But I also, part of this program today, we're going to speak to Sam. Sam, standing right next to me here, she's a Wiradjuri and Gadi woman, and she's going to show us some objects and talk to you about the Aboriginal people who lived here in and around Warurabanga, and talk about one Gadi woman, Doringa. So, and then we'll be able to make string together. So put your digital hands up if you are ready to get started. So I want to see as many as you using that hands up function there. Oh, that number is skyrocketing there. Fantastic. Lots of you using that. Have a little bit of practice using that hands up. Fantastic. That's a lot of you using that hands up. Great. I think we're just about to get started. All right. Well, welcome, Sam. Hi.
Hi.
Sam works with Sydney Living Museums as a producer of Indigenous programs. Sam comes from Wellington and Kempsey and grew up between Daringa and Gadigal lands. So can you tell us a bit about yourself and your connection to this place?
Warurabanga. My mum has passed on our Aboriginal culture to me and my family, and they lived in Sydney for many years, then moved to Daringa country out in Western Sydney. So behind me here is a possum skin cloak made by Aboriginal artist Brenda Saunders. Here you can see a map of Sydney. Down here is Daringa land. Up the top is Gadigal land in Sydney Harbour, where we are now. See this yellow circle in the middle? Here is Parramatta, which is also on Daringa land. And this serpent represents the Parramatta River, which is in Daringa land also. So today we are all Gamal. Gamal means friends in the local Aboriginal languages around Moran. When I say Gamal, it means all of you, okay? Can you say Gamal? 1, 2, 3. Gamal.
Fantastic. Well, Gamal, let me ask you a question. We've got another poll that will pop up on your screen in a moment. So my question to you is, how do you think we have gained our knowledge about the Gadi people here in Sydney? How do you think we have gained that knowledge? Okay, and I just want the poll to be excellent. Yes, great. And there are some options on your screen there. So you've got documents, stories, objects, oral histories, or all of the above. Now, a lot of you have selected stories and oral histories as the main one, and most of you have selected all of the above. And you are all correct. We learn from all those sources about the past, but particularly when we're talking about Indigenous stories, we are looking at those oral histories and those stories passed down. But fantastic work, all of you, on that one. So, let's start by looking at a painting of Aboriginal people on Sydney Harbour. Okay, so you should be able to see that on your screen now. So this painting is from 1789. So it's quite an early painting at the start of the colony from 1789. It's by Richard Colebee and it's called The Voyage of Governor Phillip to Botany Bay. Now, can you put your digital hands up if you can see some Aboriginal women on the harbour in this painting? So digital hand up if you can see the women in this painting here. Oh, fantastic. Having a really close look at the painting, what's going on there, but all of you can spot those women on the harbour there. Fantastic. That number skyrocketing up there as well with those hands up. Fantastic. So the harbour was essential to Aboriginal life. It was for survival, culture, spirit. Aboriginal women who lived in and around Moran were exceptional at fishing and had many thousands of years of knowledge and skill that was passed down generation to generation. So Sam, you've got some objects here to show us that used by Aboriginal fisherwomen.
So put your digital hands up if you haven't seen this before. Yes, that's great. I can see many of you have your hands up. This is an abalone shell that was found on this site. What do you think the Gadi fisherwomen would have made from this shell? Let's take a poll. Maybe a fishing net, a tool for digging, cooking utensils, or fishing hooks. So the poll's up now. That's great, yes. Many of you are choosing fishing hooks. And that's right, that's the answer. Fishing hooks or barra. You can see the roundness of the shell, how it would make a very strong hook. The roundness of the shell here would be carved into a hook like this. The Gadi women were very skilled in carving hooks. They would use rough rocks around the harbour to shape them, kind of like sandpaper. Can you see how the shell shimmers? This was also very helpful in attracting fish to the hook. So Gamal, what would you use today to attract fish to your hook? Let's take another poll. Would you use bait or maybe a lure? Or it's okay if you don't know anything about fishing. That's great. Many of you are choosing bait and lure, mainly bait, which both of those things would be very helpful to attract fish to your line.
Excellent. So there's another excellent work, everyone, and thanks for sharing that, Sam. So let's have a look at another image on your screen here. It's from a sketchbook of John White's journal from 1790, and very similar to the fish hooks that Sam just showed you. We have the sketches of those fish hooks from the journal of one of the colonists, John White there. So using those documents as well can help us learn a little bit about the past, as well as this really important knowledge that's been passed down through Aboriginal families. So
put your hands up if you've ever caught a fish and eaten it for dinner. Yes, that is great. Many hands are going up. It's a really great skill to have. So good to see many of you have done that before.
Fantastic. I've never been very successful at fishing. So Gamal, let's have a look at another sketch now. I've got another sketch to show you. And again, this sketch is from 1790, but it's by a different artist, a convict artist named Thomas Watling. You should be able to see it on your screen now. So Sam, who can we see here?
So you were looking at Daringa. Put your digital hands up if you've ever heard of this woman before. Yes, that is great. Many of you have heard of her before. So Doringa was a very well-known Aboriginal fisherwoman. Although she was not born on Gadigal land, Doringa lived her days on Gadi country, experiencing life before the first fleet arrived and faced with a challenging landscape when the British began to move in their waters. So Gamal, how do you think Doringa and the other fisherwomen would have felt when the British arrived in their waters? Let's take a poll, and you can choose more than one option for this. Maybe they felt curious, cautious. Many of you are saying they felt frightened and confused and angry. Yes, that is really interesting to see that many of you choose frightened and curious. I agree with you that they would have felt them things also angry.
Yeah, fantastic. It must have been really difficult for Daringa and her family to adjust to this changing world when the colonists arrived. But by visiting the governor here, she was playing a really important role in communicating with the colonists in those early days. And women like Daringa also had a really important role as the fisherwomen of their communities. So I've got another painting to show you. So this painting here, I'm going to have a really nice close look at this one. It's from 1805 and it shows a Gadi woman fishing, okay? So there should be a poll that's going to come up on your screen as well. You're going to have a really close look at this painting because I want you to see, and you can select multiple answers in this poll. And you might have had to spot it before the poll went up, but there was a fire in the canoe. You've got a woman fishing with garajan, which is fishing line. I wonder if you spotted the baby in the canoe as well. A lot of you did. The first thing I think everyone spotted was the woman fishing with the gurgeon, and then the nawi, which is the canoe. Excellent. So you all spotted those things. Fantastic. Now, the fisherwomen in Warran were very skilled at fishing, and they would fish all day long out in the harbour to bring food back to their families. And if they were fishing all day long, in their nawis, they needed to make sure that they had some lunch, they had some sustenance while they were fishing all day long. So that small fire that you see in the back of the canoe, you can see sort of the smoke coming up behind that woman, and just below there you can see some flames. That fire was to cook the fish. So as they were fishing out of the harbour, the women would, they made a fire in their canoe, and they would line the canoe with sand, and then they would collect some of these banksia cones here. Okay, so these banksia cones here made excellent fuel for the fire. They burnt really slowly, and they could build a small smouldering fire on the sand in the canoe. And as they were fishing, they were cooking that fish, having a fresh meal on the harbour, and for the children that they were looking after inside the canoes as well. So put your digital hands up, boys and girls, if you have ever cooked fish or any other kind of food on an outdoor fire like that before. I wonder if some of you have. Some of you have been camping, maybe not fish, but maybe, I'm sure some of you have roasted a marshmallow over an open fire before. Fantastic, a lot of you have. Excellent. Yeah, nearly 400 of you have cooked something over a fire. Excellent. Now,
so Gamal, I'd like to share something else about this painting. When we have a closer look, we can see the woman holding her gurgeon, fishing line, and a spiritual practice called Malgan can be seen here. Malgan is the practice when the mother would remove the tip of the pinky of their daughter on their right hand. It would then be discarded into the ocean. They did this for two purposes. So be more beneficial for fishing. It would allow them to cast more accurate throws with their fishing nets. But also they did it because it was by giving thanks to the land and the ocean, to be becoming one with land, and to continue their good fortune from fishing.
thank you for sharing that knowledge with us, Sam. We're really lucky to have that knowledge shared with us. And in a moment, we're going to show how to Warurabanga make string. And we'll be using the cultural techniques that were shared with us by Shannon Foster, who is a Darawal knowledge keeper. And she shared this knowledge with us, and we are lucky to be able to share this knowledge with you today.
So put your digital hands up if you can see this lamandra grass I'm holding. Yes, that is great. Almost 500 of you have your hands up. Amazing. So here is an image of the lamandra in the garden, which you guys might recognize more. So lamandra is the grass we would usually use to make warura, string. Durawi, lamandra. But if we went out in the garden and collected all the durawi, there wouldn't be any left, and that's not sustainable. So today we're using raffia, which is sustainably sourced from Madagascar, and we will make warura string like this. String can be used to make a lot of things. So Gamal, let's take another poll. What do you think the Gadi women could have made out of string? Maybe a fishing net, fishing line, dilly bags, or all of the above. That's great. About 300 of you have all said all of the above. All of these things can be made out of string, like this fishing net, or this dilly bag, which is called jaguma. It's a very useful skill to have.
Fantastic. So Gamal, I think it's time to Warurabanga to make string. So you should have some materials nearby. Hopefully you've been told to gather some raffia or something very similar to that, or you can start to make string. So first of all, you need your piece of string, and don't worry about how long it is, but you need to get your piece of string, and the first step today is going to be to fold it in half. Okay, so that's the first thing you need to do, is fold it in half, make sure it's nice and even. And then at the folded end of your string, okay, this part here, you're going to tie it in a knot. Okay, that's our first step today. So then your piece of string should, or raffia, should look just like this to begin. Okay, so you've got a loop at the end, a knot, and then you've got two clear strands coming off the end there. Okay, excellent. So what we need to do is, using your strong hand, your writing hand, your hand that does most of the work, you're going to use that hand to weave this, to twist the string. Your other hand is going to be holding the knot very tightly here. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is to start to twist. Now, when you twist, you're going to twist away from you. Okay, so you're going to twist away. So you're going to make sure that the string is nice and tight. Just adjust myself here so you can see. So you're going to twist it nice and tight there, away from you. And then you're going to switch it over. So you're going to bring this one to the bottom and bring the string that you haven't started twisting to the top. You're going to twist away, start twisting that string there, and then bring it towards you. Fold it over, switch it over with the other string. So you're going to twist nice and tight, bring it towards you. Twist, bring it towards you. Twist, bring it towards you. Twist, bring it towards you. And keep going like that, twisting away, bringing it towards you, making sure the twist is nice and tight. Now, it's a little bit hard to see, but you can see that's what I've done so far. Okay, so you're just going to keep twisting away, bringing it towards you. Twist away, bringing it towards you. Twisting and switching them over is another way. So twist, switch, twist, switch, twist, switch. How are you going over there, Sam?
I'm going good. So when you've been doing it for a long while and tight enough, when you hold it like that, it shouldn't come undone. So if yours is tight enough and you're doing it correctly, it should look like this. And then maybe when it's long enough, you could end up tying it and cutting this off, and you could have a bracelet.
Yeah, that's a great idea. If you wanted to keep going, you could wrap it around your wrist a few times, maybe an anklet. You could add a bead or two to it. You might use it on your pencil case, or you could use it for something useful, maybe to tie something together. So there's lots of uses for it. And you can keep continuing this technique at home, okay? And then maybe you'll be able to show your classmates via Zoom or via your Google Classrooms. So before we say Uru, I think we have time for some questions. So if you have any questions for Sam or for me or for the museum, we have our friendly moderators. We have Naomi, Russell, Jay, Elizabeth, Ed, Hayden, all behind the scenes, waiting to help you out of, help you with your questions. Okay, so let's have a look at some of these questions coming through. Okay, fantastic. Let me see which one. Okay, so how long have Aboriginal people been in Australia for? That's a really good question. So we're up to 60,000 years or beyond?
Yeah, or beyond. Aboriginals are the longest race, longest culture in the world.
Yeah, longest continuing culture in the
yeah.
world. Yeah. So I know that, 50,000 years, but there is evidence to suggest that even 100,000 years. And so our knowledge is always changing about that number as well. But I know beyond 50,000 years, Aboriginal people have been continually living in Australia. Absolutely. That was a great question. Thank you. Let's have a look. What are the shells made of? Where was it from? So shells, just like as you would go for a walk along the beach, if you're lucky enough to live along the coastline at the moment, you might collect shells. So shells often have animals living inside them. They might wash up on the shore. And I'm sure the Sydney Aboriginal people would have their favourite spots to collect shells from, or would know where there were animals and the best shells to collect. So this is a really big abalone shell, and it's really strong material. So it's a really useful one as well. So that's a really good question there. What other interesting things do we have at the museum? Well, I would love for you to come and visit one day at the museum, but we have lots of objects on display to do with also hunting. We know that Aboriginal people were skilled fighters and hunters. And so there are other techniques that the men would have shared generation to generation. And we have objects to do with all different aspects of Gadi life here. So there are lots of objects to come and see one day, but I'm sure you could do your own research online, and there are images on our website. We have information on our website, and I'm sure through your local communities, they would have information to share as well. Do you have any Aboriginal artworks as well? So artwork as well is a really big feature of this museum. So we love to explore Indigenous perspectives here. And one way to do that is through artwork, like this possum skin cloak behind me. So this possum skin cloak, it is possum skin cloaks. Well, what were possum skin cloaks used for, Sam?
So Aboriginal people might wear them to keep warm, or to put to sleep on, maybe.
Yeah.
And you can see here that Brenda Saunders, she made a map of Daringa land here.
Yeah. And also and this is a question for you, Sam, as well. What about armour? Could possum skin or animal skins, could that act as an armour, or would they not really use that type of thing for armour?
Yeah, so possum skins weren't really used for armour. They would usually make a shield out of wood and out of trees and barks. So, and when you come into the Museum of Sydney here in Gadigal Place, you can see all of the artefacts here, which we're standing in front of.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for sharing that, Sam. I learned something new there, and about the cloaks there. Excellent. Okay, and how long does it take to make a fishing net? Now, this is a really good question, and I would not know the answer, and it might be hard to gauge because I'm sure there are different skill levels, and for, you know, a very experienced Gadi woman, it's hard to say how long that would take to make a net like this.
Yeah.
What do you think, Sam?
I think for a net like this, maybe at least a couple of days. And maybe a number of women working on strings, and then they would come and tie it together. Because when you look really closely, you can see all the knots, how there's all different strands of strings or warurabanga, and they'd be tied together to make a net.
Fantastic. Oh, I love that they work together to make the nets as well. That's something that they did together. That's really lovely. And did Aboriginal men fish? Well, we've talked a lot about the fisherwomen in Sydney today, and it really was an important role for the fisherwomen, but there were techniques that the men would have used to fish. Would you like to share?
Oh,
I'll share, okay, that's all right. So one way was definitely through spears, so spear fishing around the rocks in the harbour. And so the men would use really, really long spears. You know, some spears were up to 7 meters long. So think about that for a second. Think about how long 7 meters is. That is an incredibly long spear. We know that some spears were that long. The one that we have on display is not 7 meters. It's half that size, because I'm not sure we could fit a 7 meter spear in this room, but it would have been used from a grass plant sometimes, or other sort of materials, and it would have prongs at the end, like a fork. So, so really good for fishing and stabbing fish at really deep levels in the harbour. So men would use those techniques, but it really was the women who were bringing fish and fish from the harbour to their families. And there was a lot of hunting that was going on land as well. And there were some really interesting techniques that some of the men were using to hunt animals along this in this area.
So I see a question which is asking the name of my job. So I'm an associate producer for Indigenous programs. It's my responsibility to produce like NAIDOC or Eel Festival you may have heard of, which is held in Parramatta. And I also help other producers with bringing in other Aboriginal artists and other Aboriginal performers to be held in their programs also.
Fantastic. Yeah, really, really exciting stuff Sam
Yeah.
gets to do once a lot of it's been moved online, but once these festivals and events are really interesting to come along to. When did the British people come and meet the Gadi people? That's a really good question. So we know that the first fleet arrived in 1788 and you know, there would have been efforts to communicate between those two groups of people. And as you can imagine, these two groups of people didn't know each other's languages. So it would have been a lot of miscommunication in those early days of the colony. But I think there was a bit of curiosity on both sides in those very early days, trying to learn about each other and, you know, their cultures, okay? But then, you know, as the colony grew and as the land was taken with the animals that the colonists had brought from England and they built their roads and buildings, more and more of the land was taken from the Gadi people and they were forced off it in that way.
And like you said, how Daringa and Colebee played a very important part in communicating with the colonists. When Doringa had her baby in December 1790, and then a few days later, her and Colebee visited Governor Phillip here in Government House to show them their child, which played a very important role.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. These have just been fantastic questions, but unfortunately we have to wrap up our part here, but our moderators will be online for a little bit longer to answer these fantastic questions coming through. So moderators will be able to help you for the next 10 minutes or so, up until 3 o'clock, I think, is when they say goodbye. But please keep those questions coming through. And so one last digital hands up for us. Did you enjoy today's session? Did you learn something new? We'd love to see that last digital hands up today. Fantastic. Great job. I'm very glad that you enjoyed it. You learned something new, maybe a new technique. Fantastic. And if you are interested in any other virtual excursions, Sydney Living Museums have a few more to choose from. They're all listed on our website. We have some fantastic learning resources for other stages. If you go on Facebook, like the Facebook page, there are events that pop up, more live events in the future. So stay in touch. And from Sam and I think we're going to say Uru. So Uru, everyone. Thanks for joining us.